This week, the Carney government rolled out its first budget. It is a mammoth 400-plus page plan that includes major investments in infrastructure and defense, but one of the largest deficits in Canadian history. Joining us now on BT, Finance Minister François-Philippe. A pleasure to welcome you in studio, Finance Minister.
Thank you for having me.
We've spoken a few times virtually. So
starting the day with you here in Toronto. This is great.
Okay, so let me ask you, because your government is promising that these budgetary investments, as we've just laid out, which are significantly increasing the deficit, they're going to bring about $500 billion in additional investment, private investment, over 5 years. How can you be so sure that those returns will come?
Well, first of all, you're right. This is an investment budget. This is a game changer for the country because, first of all, we say we're going to balance the operating budget, within 3 years. So, I mean, your revenue will balance with your expenses.
I mean, some people might just say spending is spending is spending.
Yeah, no. Well, but I would say there's a difference. Folks at home understand, when you go to the grocery, you spend. When you buy a house, you invest. I think that's kind of the same thing with government. So we say we're not going to borrow for the day-to-day expenses. When we're going to borrow in 3 years from now, it's only going to be to invest. To your point, we're very confident because, we know that if you invest in the kind of things like, for example, in infrastructure, in housing, in productivity, in competitiveness, this is how you grow the economy. So if you take a mine, for example, by the credits we've put there, and that's really relevant for Ontario with the Ring of Fire and all that, if you put the conditions for people to invest, then the province will come on board as well. Then you will have the municipalities. Then you have our First Nations partners. So what we say is that we are really supercharging growth in the country because the challenge we have as a nation is that for decades, we have not been as competitive and our productivity has been going down. So this is a really a different road we're taking. We say we need to put back the country to make sure that we deal with the issues of today. Because, the big issue for people is affordability. That's why the first thing we did was a tax cut for 22 million Canadians. Then the other thing you're looking is housing. If you talk to young people in the country, their first concern is how can I get ahead and buy a home? So we're dealing with affordable housing. We're dealing also with our sovereignty to defend the country. But the big pillar is how can small and medium-sized businesses can invest in the country so we grow the economy together.
Your budget, for instance, and this is just one example, it leans on things like, for instance, tax write-offs for things like equipment and machinery to incentivize that business investment. That's an idea, though, that was introduced as far back as 2018 by the former Trudeau government, of which you also had a prominent role in. So two questions here. How does your, new iteration of that idea, how will it yield different results? And how does, recycling old ideas actually make this budget transformative?
Well, I would say we're supercharging that. Yes, at the time we did certain things, but today, as we speak, if you're a business owner and you're looking, if I invest in plant equipment and technology and AI, for example, you can immediately expense that. This is a game changer. If you look at before the budget and after the budget, this is very different. And the other thing is, the tax rate we have now is the most competitive. So if you have $1 to invest between the United States or Canada, you look at Canada and we're going to be the most competitive jurisdiction on a tax basis for that. So that's all these incentives is really to make sure that people would seize the moment and build because that's the moment we need to, we have seen the headwinds. Let's be honest, Canada, the rest of the world, the world has changed. The speed, the scope, scale of change is like not something we've seen in a long time. And then you say, who has the fiscal capacity? And, when we were in Washington, you may have heard that. They said there's two countries in the world where you can afford that. It's Germany and Canada. And then you use your fiscal power to say, what can I do? The smart thing to do is infrastructure, is housing, is competitiveness. And that's the road we want to travel together, is really empowering Canadians, taking control. Because one way would be to retreat and say, just hope for the best. The other thing is that we believe in ourselves. We're strong. I have confidence in Canada. Let's invest in ourselves.
I take your point that, the landscape is obviously different, but there's probably room for interpretation here on your government's promise that this is a transformative budget. And I'm not the one saying that. If you'll just humor me for a moment here. The Bank of Montreal says, yes, large amounts of stimulus are going to be hitting the economy, but they write in their analysis, we already know about the vast majority of it. They won't be revising their growth forecast. Scotiabank economist Rebecca Young says in her analysis that this plan delivered on policy proposals that had already been channeled, if not tabled. And Desjardins economists, they published their analysis that says budget 2025 was expected to be one for the record books, but in some ways it was more of the same. So still, how can you live up to that promise that the economy is going to grow in ways that it hasn't already?
Well, I like all of them, and I read their comments like you, but I would say when you say, when we look transformational, I'll give you an example. The largest economy in Europe is Germany. If you look at their investment plan, the Canadian plan is either at par or even more than the largest economy in Europe. So when I say it's transformational and generational, you have to look at that. They have their own plan to put Germany back on a path for growth. You look at Canada, and what we've done is exactly what I would say economists would say. If you want to grow the economy, if you want to empower people, if you want to make sure that people will find a job, be about to buy a home and the economy to grow, the things to invest is infrastructure, housing, and productivity. That's what we're doing. So when I say it's generational, is that if you look at the G7 country, Canada and Germany are really the ones who stand out. We have the fiscal capacity. We both face headwind, but we have made choice which really will make this economy grow. And that's what, at the end of the day, you want, you know, like I said. And at the same time, I would say we put the house in order, because our viewers know that they've been many families have been tightening their belt for quite some time. And as you said, I was there. Now it was the time after 10 years to say, listen, let's put our house in order. We found $60 billion of savings, which I would say, you know, compare well to what other governments have done before. This is very serious, rigorous. And my point is that if you want to invest more, we need to spend less. And that's what people in the street tell me. They said, sir, yes, you look at the future, but you're putting the house in order. That's why we elected you for.
Okay, Minister, I have to leave it there. I'm out of time. A pleasure to speak with you. Thanks for making time for the conversation.
It's always a pleasure. Thank you very much.